Hello, hello. Welcome back to Red Live. It's so nice to have you back on my channel. Oh my God. Thank you for coming back. So today I'm starting my series Opinionated Red, and the whole purpose of this series is to really get into video essays. Like the thing that makes me love YouTube and encourage me to content create on YouTube is the fact that so many of the people that I love on YouTube create fantastic, informative, and pretty well researched video essays that make me rethink so many topics about my life, or even to just add depth to what I think I know about these topics. And so that's why I'm here starting my own video essay series, and it's called Opinionated Red. So stick along for the journey and let's get into the first episode. So today we are specifically talking about the biggest branding mistakes that creatives make when they are building their brands. And I believe that is being disingenuous, and maybe not intentionally, but I believe that if you aren't super aware of who you are, you haven't really done a lot of the hard work of getting to know yourself and honestly getting to know the cringy parts of yourself, then it can be really hard to go through that process while also managing a brand, especially if that creative brand is public facing, right? Where you are at the center of it, you're sharing your practice, you're sharing what you do, whether you're a visual artist, music artist, fashion designer. A lot of yourself is tied into that. And so, because I'm specifically talking about creative branding, I do believe that artists, when they're creating their personal brand, need to know who they are and need to be able to honestly and openly and pretty effectively communicate that to anybody who's going to be interacting with your brand, whether that's an audience, whether that's another brand that you want to collaborate with, whether these are potential clients or collectors or venue spots that want to host events that you're doing. Whatever that may look like, the better you can communicate your brand and almost even present it as a narrative that people can follow, the more likely it is to be received. And I'm not going to say necessarily well received. I've received so many rejections with my personal brand, but it will be received in a way where people are genuinely understanding what it is that you have to offer them. And this is also important because it'll lead you towards opportunities that you really need. But we'll get into all the rip and rap. I'm already getting on my soapbox. As you can see, this is a topic that I'm genuinely passionate about. So let's just get into the first topic, or the first point, as to why knowing yourself before you start your own creative brand is so important. I also want to real quick kind of make a point about the fact that I'm coming at this topic from a very nuanced perspective. Um, what if we can even think about most of the like transphobia and things that we've seen, like with all the laws and people speaking out, like in the media, celebrities, all that whole thing. One thing that we've come to notice is that queer people, non-binary people, trans people are gaining a voice, and we're growing in our ability to be able to speak to the greater majority and speak to more privileged communities and say, hey, we don't agree with this treatment, we don't agree with these laws, we don't agree with all these things. And it's important for that perspective to exist, right? It creates fairness and it creates equality, because I'm not going to get into the whole microcosm of what happens when a concentrated few who are privileged have power. We're literally seeing it play out. But again, this is why a nuanced perspective is important. And even though there's probably hundreds of branding and creating videos online, even a few from the queer community that already exist, I feel like, again, this nuanced perspective is needed, because while people can give you a grand understanding of a problem or how to navigate a situation, what things look like on the ground can be very different. And so what do you do when you're actually in your community trying to find support, trying to expand your personal creative brand in communities where people may not be that hype to interact with you? And I'm not saying that to be discouraging, but even in the Black community, there's plenty of spaces where people are anti-trans, anti-non-binary, don't want to really understand the nuances of gender and things like that. So because of that, I do think this perspective is important, and it allows, again, for more people to just navigate the tricky parts easier. So first, let's just talk about why it's so important to begin with, right? Like, why does your brand need to feel genuine and need to come from a foundation of you knowing who you are? Well, I would offer to you the examples of the many brands that we've seen fall and then like go up in like a ball of flames, so to speak. And I'm really just speaking from like a public perception value. Most of the people, rich people who lose their brands, are still going to be rich at the end of the day, and they're still going to be fine. But if you look at people like Ellen DeGeneres, it's a great example of how someone intentionally, maybe fabricated a version of themselves that they felt like was going to be better perceived, better received, and was going to be better for their brand, but it just wasn't genuine. So even though that amassed a lot of success, there had to come a day where that inauthentic, disingenuous, curation were to meet a more authentic perception of the person behind the brand and the person so closely associated with the brand. And that's just because times change, number one, but it's also because there is such a stark difference between those two realities, right? Okay, if you're just a little bit more dramatized or a little bit more emotional for the fact that you're putting on like an entertaining, relation, like you gotta have personality, right? If that's what's happening, then I'm not saying that you're being deceptive, or that's not what I'm referring to. But if you are someone who feels like, man, no one's gonna like me if I show who I really am, so let me like put on, then you're already heading down a bad path. Because at the end of the day, you can't force people to engage with something they aren't comfortable with. And when you are trying to do that, you're going to resort to some negative behaviors towards things that essentially undermine people's rights to choose who they want to interact with based off of how they feel about you and how they feel about your brand. And I just want to also add in, while I'm here editing, that this is also true for people who are just kind of terrible in the public eye. People who are assholes and just don't really care. So long as that is who they are from the beginning, they'll still likely build a following or a fan base or audience of people who agree with them. Still, the most important piece is that people feel like they still know who you are, even if you were an asshole from the beginning. There are things you do that can almost unmask you to your audience. And if it's so dramatic, it makes people really feel like, wow, I've been following a brand I don't know and don't understand because of deception, then they're likely to disengage. And while, like I said, if you've already amassed a lot of wealth and fame or whatever, it's likely not to ultimately cancel you, but it will still in some way, shape, or form dismantle the public relationship you've been able to manufacture with your brand. And while this may seem like a tangent, what this truly makes me think about is how important our responsibility is as adults to younger people as we come to know ourselves and as we come into our identity, right? Like the whole coming of age process is hard, it's difficult, and it can be very tumultuous if you don't have enough public examples of how to navigate tricky spaces. Again, as a queer, non-binary person, there's been so many times where I did not have anything to look towards in order to navigate a tricky situation that was influential and important to my coming of age story and my understanding of myself. So when I look at branding and when I look at how I'm presenting myself to the public, again, I'm reminded of this responsibility that I feel like adults have. And it's not necessarily a responsibility that the West or that religion may give us as adults, but it's what I feel like is our innate and something that has been mentioned by many indigenous communities, that we should be in some way, shape, or form taking our lived experiences and what we learn about them and how that helped us find ourselves and turning it into something that can help younger people do the same with a lot less friction, right? And when you incorporate that idea into your branding process, you don't just create something that people like and engage with in the moment, but you create something that people look back on years from now and go, wow, that brand or the people behind that brand and the thoughts and ideologies that were associated with that brand truly influenced my life in a positive way, right? It's the difference between going back on a like canceled, again, people would be having their money, but it's like going to look back at a canceled YouTuber and being like, dang, the things I didn't see, versus going back and looking at a YouTuber and being like, whoa, they were with me the entire time. And I always knew who I was engaging with, and the rug was never pulled from under me, right? And even if you stop, say you stop creating, or you stop doing something, you still want like how people remember your legacy and how people remember your brand to be important. So there's always an opportunity for, like the truth to come out and for people to disengage with the reality or the delusion that they've gotten used to. So just to bring it back to the main point of this section, the young people truly do need us. They're watching the world, democracy, all these things they've known to be normal literally crumble around them. And so they'll be desperate for leaders, and not just any leaders, but people who are experiencing a life that allows them to speak up about the things that they see happening in the world and haven't doled themselves out to those realities. So why am I saying this? This is not meant to be a doomsday, sad type of video, and I really am hoping it is not going in that direction. But it is to reacquaint you with the real work of doing creative branding, which is not just taking pictures and process videos and posting them on social media, but it's actually figuring out what are all of the internal parts of you? What are all of the opinions and views and perspectives and like art influences that are helping you create in this very moment? How can those things be translated into symbolism, into aesthetics, and into other public displays that help other people who agree and want to be a part of your tribe or your community to come on and sign on, and maybe in turn support any products, ventures, or projects that you have to come out, right? So why am I bringing this up? I'm bringing this up because this work is truly hard work. It's not just a word I'm throwing in there to try to make my point come across more easily. This work is truly hard. We don't know what it may do to us, what it's going to change about our opinions, our outward aesthetic. We don't know how it's going to change our personal relationships, and we don't know how long it's going to take, right? I was in therapy for years, just trying to figure out why I was having certain emotional reactions. I was trying to figure out why I was uncomfortable dressing the way I wanted in the morning. These things, while they may seem surface level, they have very deep rooted beginnings, and it may not always be easy to find. So give yourself the time, the patience, and the freedom to figure it out. Because once you have it figured out, it will be like capturing lightning in a bottle. You'll be able to have exactly what you need to move forward. And you'll be surprised by how many people connect with your brand. Like when I was masking before, I constantly found myself in situations where I had to pretend, put on, and continue the charade and the mask in order to be liked, in order to be loved, in order to be included in certain creative projects. And I was tired of that shit. So when I just took a break to learn about who I was, and I started risking, and it feels like a risk in the beginning, but really it's just what you need to do. But I started risking, how I felt by just wanting to be myself. And so where before I was afraid to wear something, now I was just going out and putting it on my body and seeing what happened, right? And it felt scary, it felt risky, but what tended to happen was people show me so much more love, acceptance, and appreciation for the quirks and things that I was ashamed about. And so it healed me in a way. And over years now, I've received so much positive affirmation for who I am that it seems crazy that I would step outside of that just to please somebody else or just to make somebody else comfortable. And you finding that for yourself will be immaculate for your brand. And I want you to go out and try it before you think I'm just on this woo-woo, cliche, like Hallmark card stuff. That's not where I am. I'm really trying to connect and really trying to, again, like I said before, this was my journey. This was my lesson. And there's a lot of young people, again, I'm about to cross over into 30 soon. There are people, again, a decade younger than me where this is your journey. This is where you're figuring it out right now. You're trying to say, who am I? What does that mean? What do I support? What are my values? And because this is America, we always end up, if we're going to be in creative business and creative ventures, we're figuring out how do we attach that to our brand, and again, in a way that people can connect with genuinely. I don't want any of you young people to go out and create a whole brand and then feel like, oh, I was wrong in being so open with myself because I didn't even know myself, right? And that's not to say that this work needs to happen at any specific time. I'm no better just because I'm older, but it does mean that you should begin that work before you begin putting your brand out to the public, before you give strangers who don't know you, who might not care for you, the ability and the power to break you apart and criticize you and question you. And you know, you're like vulnerable. I don't know if you ever see that. I don't know if you ever seen that one part in Wreck-It Ralph where he finally sees the comment section and he wasn't ready to see the comment section, and shit just got, it got wild. He started crying. I was crying and I'm grown. But that's just to say, like, we're not always ready for the onslaught of commentary that we're going to get by exposing ourselves, or even a brand that's rooted in ourselves, to the world or to the internet. So just again, do this work to create a skin and create a armor, really, that's a better word, armor, against what you're going to experience, and so that way you can keep going. Another thing I would hate to happen to people trying to build their own creative brand is to be caught up in the transition of trying to figure out who you are, and for that to be some reason why you stop creating or stop putting yourself out there because you don't want to deal with the schism. And again, things will change. Like, you will grow, you will evolve, but if you know who you are kind of at your foundation, those changes won't be enough to make people feel like they don't know who you are anymore. And I hope that makes sense. So I don't really have much more to contribute to this specific topic in terms of just figuring out how to be comfortable with yourself. I think I pretty much touched on everything that I can get into while I'm just, you know, ranting and telling you all how I feel. But I do want to create a larger scale series of videos around this, about how you really do the step-by-step plan to take this work and translate it into a brand. You know, there's paying attention to symbolism, there's doing market research, there's, you know, figuring out what are the needs in your community and how you can fit those with the ideas that you have. Like, this is a much more complex idea that I did want to squeeze down into one video, but since I'm still getting used to video essays and I'm still building my community here on YouTube, I decided to just take a stab at something that was easier to talk about and a little bit more microscopic, and I'll grow as the channel grows. So I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, please like, subscribe, hit that little bell button so you know when I'm posting. I'm trying to get them views up. They got that public watch hour thing on me, so you know we're trying to monetize, baby. We're trying to monetize. All right, so like I said, like, share, comment, subscribe, all that business, and I will see you guys in the next video. All right, peace. Red out. Have a red day, baby. A red weekend, all of that shit. All right.